This is the I Read Comic Books podcast. I am your host, Mike Rapin. Joining me this week, two solar flares sent to melt me into oblivion, Tia Vassiliou.
Hello.
And Zach McCrary.
What's up?
I'm going insane, you guys. I haven't been recording this podcast for 6 weeks. I don't know what to do about it. I ran throughout the entire city of Indianapolis for a weekend at Gen Con, and now I'm back. If you saw some posts on TikTok, I talked a little bit about my Gen Con experience because I still managed to pick up comic books, which was really fun. Zach, I don't know if we officially did this, but like, you're officially part of like the IRCB crew now. We got fan art, we got art and avatar stuff for you. Like, I guess welcome to the show. Remind folks at home again once more who you are, what you do, I guess, before we get into our regular show.
Cool. Yeah. I don't remember if we did that the last time or not, but thank you for welcoming me. Zach McCrary. I have a podcast called The Comics That We Love. I started listening to I Read Comic Books, reached out about just kind of working together, doing fun stuff, and lo and behold, me and Mike liked each other, and then me and Paul liked each other, and it just keeps kind of growing from there, and now I'm part of the gang. Yeah, I hope everybody else likes me.
It'll be a 50-50 split, because like still at this point, I've known Brian for over a decade, and it's still like every other day. I don't know how he's feeling. Brian, Prooflistener right now, is giving me evil eyes. I don't know. But no, just kidding. But Zach, I'm very excited to have you on the show. We've got a cool little avatar for you. Folks who've seen maybe on our Patreon, maybe on the IRCB Discord, all the new banners and stuff have your face. I'm very excited. But Tia, you're also here. I'm very excited to talk to all of you. I'm just excited to talk to like everybody, because I feel like the summer has been, it's been a wild this month in particular. I think I said in my email this week, like everything is collapsing in on itself because I made a whole bunch of plans thinking, yeah, I'm going to be really social. And then, of course, I did the classic thing of like triple booking, double booking, not realizing dates fell on top of each other, because as much as my calendar is updated, the one thing I never do is check it. So it's been a very interesting. But Tia, how have you been? I guess let's just dive right into things. How have you been? How have comic books been? Sorry, Zach and Tia, I switched up the order because of things. So let's just get into it. I'm so rusty. It's been so long.
We spent like 10 minutes planning, and now we're just improvising. It's all good.
Yeah.
Fuck it, we'll do it live.
Yeah.
Well, I have had an extremely busy summer. I got a new job and I moved, and I don't know if people who've been following for a while know that when I lived in New York, I moved into this apartment. It was a 4th floor walk up. I moved into this place literally by myself. When I say by myself, I don't mean that it was just like me and some friends and no professional supervision. It was literally just me. Okay. And a van. And I had 50 boxes of books to bring up to my 4th floor walk up by myself.
Wait, books or like prose or comics? I just want to make sure for the folks at home.
A mixture of both.
Okay.
And my dumbass, who is not good at physics, I guess, didn't realize that just because you can fill a box with books, including comics, which are heavier than you think, it doesn't mean that you can actually lift that box and carry it up 4 flights of stairs. But I am made of like mostly anger, so I somehow managed to do it. And then after that experience, I realized that I probably should never subject myself to that again. So in the last like 5 years or so, it's been a process of culling the books. And those of you who hang out in our Discord may have seen me posting up for grabs many stacks of random comic floppies that I had that I was sadly not going to be bringing with me. I sent some to Danny. I sent some to Mike.
Mm-hmm.
Some of that stuff that I found in there, I was just like, when was I collecting Daredevil single issues?
Everyone knows you, Tia. You love Daredevil. Right?
Actually, I think that you could trace it to an episode of the Comixologist podcast that I did with Kara, where it was, I can't remember if it was a Spider-Man or a Daredevil book, but the other, they both appeared in it, and they were making heart eyes at each other the whole time. And me and Kara were like, I see you, even though Daredevil can't see you, we see you. And I think that might be why I was collecting those. But anyway, lots of fun mysteries in that experience. But it got me really excited about comics again, because as some of you might know, for the past like while, I've just kind of felt like I was in a comics flop era.
Sure. I mean, and I think we talked about this on the show. There was like kind of a slump in like just like not a ton of really awesome comics coming out consistently. So like it's kind of like a 1-2 punch of like, I don't know if we want to read anything, because I feel that too. I was looking at my like to read list and I was like, what did I read for like the past 3 months? And the answer is not very much.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a long way of saying that it's good to be here. And I have been reading comics, and I will tell you about one of them that I read right now. So Titan Comics did a graphic novel called Mother Nature by Jamie Lee Curtis.
I'm so curious to hear about this.
I saw that name on the promo email that Titan sent us, and I was like, this is like a weird cash grab, right? And I think she's like fully involved in this book though, right?
Yeah, she really is.
Yeah, so apparently it's like adapted from a Comet Pictures Blumhouse film script that she wrote. And I'm unclear how this came to be, right? Because so looking at the actual book itself, Carl Stevens is the artist, and Jamie Lee Curtis and Russell Goldman are both credited as being involved as well. And I think as the artist, Carl Stevens adapted the script to the graphic novel.
Interesting.
I think.
Okay.
I could be wrong, but that was like the sense that I got. But I'm just like so curious, like, are Carl and Jamie Lee buds? Like, did he see the film and was like, I really want to get my hands on this? And like his people called her people. Like, I don't know. I'm really interested to learn how this happened. And also, it's watercolor art, you guys. Like, it made me so happy. It was so beautiful, and it's set in the Southwest, which I think really lends itself perfectly as a setting to watercolor art. And it's kind of like, I guess, environmental supernatural horror is the genre that I would call it, like high level, which also lends itself really, really well to watercolors. So as many of you know, if I'm not into the art, I will not read a book. It does not matter who wrote it, what the characters are. And so like, yeah, it was really, really easy for me to get into this book because the art was pretty beautiful. But also I think, and if you've been on the Discord recently, like we've been discussing these kind of more experimental comic book artists lately. And some people really don't like it. I think that this is still kind of straightforward enough that if you're not as into that, you can still follow it, but then there's like enough also of the watercolor kind of more painterly element to like make everybody happy, which we love that for us.
Yes.
So the story is basically there's this evil oil corporation, Cobalt Corp, and they operate in a small town, and a little girl's father dies in an accident that she believes they're responsible for. And then years later, this company is still operating, and they really work hard to present themselves as benevolent. And so they're doing this project called Mother Nature, and it's supposed to be all about like, yay, clean water. But this girl who's like a grown-up woman now, and spends her time basically trying to like expose them and stop them through vandalism and like sabotaging their work sites and things. And she experiences like a supernatural event, like sort of radioactive spider bite, kind of moment, and then her revenge becomes like super powered.
Hell yeah.
So the metaphor here is like really not subtle, right?
Yeah.
The story
Nestle is destroying America's freshwater.
yeah. It's like we know what lane we're in. It's really straightforward. We've got themes of climate justice and like generational responsibility. And I will just say, even though I don't feel like I'm the person to speak on this, but I will say that there are, there's a Native American presence in the story. And my understanding is that the creators did due diligence to make sure that was represented like properly. But as I said, I can't, like, I'm not the person to make that call, but it's there. So yeah, it's just what I like about this book is that the story is told visually. This is even though a famous person wrote the script, they don't just lean on the script. It's really beautiful visual storytelling. It has that feel of like an auteur art house film, that has a really strong aesthetic point of view. Like
Totally.
That's
people
cool.
who like Sofia Coppola films, like they have an aesthetic, right? Or like Wes Anderson, like, or other I'm not a film hoe. You guys know what I mean.
You nailed it with Sofia Coppola and Wes Anderson. If you're
Yeah.
not getting pictures in your head, folks, use Google. I'm sorry. We
Right.
can't do that. We can't do the heavy lifting for you. This is an audio medium, okay?
There's AI generated Wes Anderson stuff all over TikTok. I've seen
He hates it, and that's fine by me.
I hate Wes Anderson too. So yeah. But I don't personally enjoy Wes Anderson's aesthetic, but I recognize objectively that he has one. Right. And it's recognizable. And I got that from this book too. Like the aesthetic point of view, it gives you a real sense for the place and the tension that is in the story. And it's the kind of visual storytelling where you really have to look at the picture. Like you can't just skim the dialogue here. You have to really inhabit the panels. And I think that is what the point is of reading comics, right? Like if I just wanted to skim the words, I'd read prose.
Totally.
And then like the supernatural elements here are really incorporated beautifully with like a strong color story. The panels pace things really well. Like if you pay attention to the panels, it's more or less a grid. So there's not a lot to distract you with like the structure of the panels, but then when you're meant to sort of take more time in a panel, they're bigger. And then when things are moving really quickly in the story, they're smaller to like pull you through quicker, and which is a subtle thing, but it's really well done.
So you tell me this Carl Stevens fella really knows how to make a darn comic book? Because it sounds like they're using all of the amazing things that we love about comics, right? All in one thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's super exciting. I'm very excited to check this out then, because I know we had a nice preview copy of this, but like I do want to see this watercolor like on print. So I'll have to look for this at like a comic book shop or something in the near future.
Yeah, I think it's like a $30 hardcover. Like it's a nice book, so definitely one for the shelf.
I looked up the art while you were talking about it because I was curious, and yeah, I really like the look of this book, and I'm definitely gonna have to pick this one up.
Cool. So Zach, I will pass it to you. What have you been reading?
So one of the books that I read was something I picked up back in June. You ever just go perusing and you see a number 1 and you're like, sure, and then but you don't get to it forever because it was just kind of a whim. That's what happened to me this week with a book called Hearts of Steel. It's book 1, Debris, Cyrano, and Me. It's written by Jose Luis Munuera and Becca, which is a couple, and they just kind of hybridize their names together. They write together. The art was by Munuera, letters by Chromatic Limited, and coloring from Sedias. This was specifically book 1 of a graphic novel, but I haven't been able to find when or where the sequel is going to come from. So it was published in America by Europe Comics, but was originally released in French in 2022 by Dupuis. I don't speak French.
Yeah.
Dupuis. Dupuis. That looks right to me.
Yeah, that's right.
And translated into English and came out in June of this year. And I just thought that this book was so cool that when it was my turn to come on the show, I was like, yeah, this is one that I feel like people need to know about, because even in doing a little bit of research for it, I didn't see a whole lot. I couldn't even find it on Europe Comics' website, which doesn't make any sense to me. But it's a beautiful comic set in a future world where humans have advanced like technologically to the point where you can access anything and all media at a snap with a screen that just kind of appears in front of you, that kind of thing. They've created robots and enslaved them to act as their nannies and butlers and farmhands, etc.
Okay.
And what's interesting is that though the tech has moved forward a ton, humanity has stepped backwards in style of dress and means of travel they take. I've seen people describe it as a steampunk, but I really don't feel like it's steampunk. Like it doesn't have that kind of vibe. Steampunk has a vibe.
But Zach, the cover has a guy in a top hat, so it has to be steampunk.
Is there a gear? Does he have a gear like as a decorative motif on the top hat?
No, but his head is just a circular light.
This
Like that. Yeah.
Dude, trying to Google for this, all I can find is pirate sites. It's so weird. Like, there's no official listing. Amazon doesn't have it listed
Yeah.
anywhere. Like, Barnes and Noble, Penk, no one has it
I
listed.
don't
It's just
understand.
like, read it for free online. It's like, but I'm trying not to pirate. I'm trying not to steal this comic book.
That's exactly. I was so frustrated. I'm like, why is this not out there? Because it's so good. But like, so yeah, like they've got this technology where you could just make Netflix appear in front of your face whenever you feel like it, and the little girl does. Like, she loves the story of Cyrano de Bergerac, and that actually plays like a role in the story of like her and this friend that she has. Her only friend is via the internet, and they talk to each other every night. And her name's Tal. But then, like the style and placement of this story feels very antebellum South, which I think is also really interesting. The characters are all dressed in the garb of the period, while the robots, of course, are dressed as you'd expect the slaves of the period to be for whatever role they're in. Like, that is very much what's going on here. Like like they are very up on Front Street. Like, the robots of this world are like in place of like the American like slavery time period. So the story follows this little girl, Isaiah, who has developed this beautiful mother-daughter relationship with her nanny, a robot named Debris, and her mother, a mean-spirited woman, doesn't really care about her daughter and Debris, and Debris is like the only love that she's ever known. And mom doesn't like that and sends Debris away, basically. And so the whole story is about Isaiah and her friend Tal, who has like a story of their own that I don't want to divulge. But like the two of them kind of go on almost like a Tom Sawyer Huck Finn adventure to go and find Debris, and I mean, it's very on the nose that this story is like a sci-fi interpretation of the American period of slavery and the antebellum South, because there's like an underground railroad to secret away robots who are going to be tossed away, kind of thing, and stuff like it's very well done. It's very tastefully done, and that's what I really appreciated about it. I really like the art. The art is gorgeous, and it's got kind of this Looney Tunes vibe, which is weird to say, but it really worked here. Like, there's one guy who's got kind of a Yosemite Sam, like big handlebar mustache and a giant nose. But then they're like the way that humans were drawn in Looney Tune cartoons. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And it's beautiful, and it fits. They made it work for this story so well. And it's got a ton of heart and tells this interesting tale of a period from America's past, and from an outsider perspective, because it was written by folks from Europe, and which I also thought was really interesting. And I'm really glad that I found it. So I think that Hearts of Steel, go find a damn copy of it somewhere, people. Pay for it. and it's really good. And I'm thrilled that I found it.
It's fascinating to me how Europeans, I'm going to make some generalizations here. So Europe, just like stay home. But
don't at her.
As an American art historian, I also have observed that like Europeans are really interested in the American 19th century, and particularly sometimes in social narratives that Europeans like to believe don't apply to them. I'll say tactfully.
Listen, are you talking about spaghetti westerns? Because those were really popular in Italy.
Like, for a more neutral example, like Germans love cowboys as a generalization. Like, and in art in like the 19th and 20th century, there were like a lot of German painters who were like obsessed with painting the American West. But like, so I'm like making a connection here to what you're talking about, but like taking it a little bit more of a critical step further, because I feel like I get what they're trying to do with this story, but I just like, it's interesting to me that they're like, like let's set it in the American antebellum, because the French couldn't possibly have any sort of equivalent in our history where we would like have such things to like have a robot metaphor about.
Listen, nowhere in France is as beautiful as the American South. I think that's what this artist is getting at, right? Well, let me take over here before I say any more ridiculous shit. Let me step into
what
that.
do you got, Mike?
So like I said, I was at like Gen Con for a week. I was traveling, drove to the Midwest. I saw Brian and Kate in person, which is very nice. We got to play some board games and hang out, which is cool. And then I went to Gen Con and played even more tabletop games and came close to crying in the middle of a tabletop game because we were touching on some very intricate inside your body things, which I forget that sometimes games can do that, and that's always great. If you're interested in playing a game like that it's basically therapy at the table, it's called Divination. It uses a tarot deck instead of dice to choose what you're rolling and how outcomes go. And it's one of the most beautiful games ever devised as far as I'm concerned. So recommend that, divinationrpg.com. But as far as comics are concerned, I didn't read comics for like a week and a half, which is pretty much like blasphemy in my own mental household. And so I went super hard yesterday and read basically like 1,200 chapter or pages of comics, which is crazy. In particular, I read a series called Tekkonkinkreet, which is a series you may have heard of before. There was a movie that came out a few years ago. This is by Teo Matsumoto. It's basically a 32-page series about two kids named Black and White living in Treasure City, which is kind of like a Tokyo analog. I've read this in the Viz app. So there's the Shonen Jump app, then there's the Viz Manga app. So I read it in the Viz Manga app. If you're interested, it's $2 a month. They're not sponsoring us, but if they want to, give us a call, Viz. Anyway, so it's about these two kids. They're named Black and White. They live in this broken down car. They fight Yakuza and ultimately thrive in what they call their city. They own Treasure City, this huge megapolis, because they're everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Yakuza fear them, and the gangsters who aren't in the know usually get the shit kicked out of them. White is this innocent, extremely childish, kind of mildly violent kid who kind of just lives his life on the whims of whatever he finds interesting that day. Like, one of the core bits of this story is he doesn't really understand how apples are made, like how you get new apples. And eventually Black explains this to him. So they plant a seed, and the seed growing in this big city is kind of like this theme throughout the book, representing a little bit of White's innocence. And Black is this hyper violent, slightly older brother of these kids. They're supposed to be like 10 and 11 years old. It's pretty wild. And they're kicking the ever living shit out of Yakuza, like every single chapter. It's really, really funny. The art in this book is really weird in the way that it's drawn. It kind of it like shies away from what I think most folks would expect from a manga series, and I really like that. It's a book that came out in the 90s, and so it has like this 90s era cartoon vibe that kind of reminded me of some of the weirdness of like Ren and Stimpy or Rocko's Modern Life or Rugrats in like its thick line work and overall like aesthetic, that everything is a little grotesque. Nothing is a straight line. All of the characters have just these like severe imperfections to them, but that makes them very defining, like gives them all very defining traits. So you figure out who the main characters are of the story very, very quickly. I don't know. Matsumoto seems to have this like seems to have been trying for something like cluttered without being overwhelming, and leaning into character features like over and over, pushing the looks of many of the characters into extreme levels, kind of what I was saying. And like there's just characters who are just so boldly drawn. At first I was like, this is just so ugly, and then I'm like, no, this is actually perfect for this book. Everything about it has just this kind of off feeling, and by the end of it, that's not even the thing that you focus on anymore, because the story is about these two kids, mostly one of them, mostly Black, and they're constantly beating the shit out of these Yakuza and these other shitheads, and the story's done in this really odd tempo pace. Like, chapters will have 3 stories in them, and there's no real transition between the stories. So there'll be a story about Black and White, and a story about some of the Yakuza, and a story about 2 of the police officers that are kind of in the book. And the transition between those, I think in modern manga, you'd get like a little beat panel or something to let you know there's going to be a transition of time or something. And in this book, a panel will go by and suddenly we're focusing on the Yakuza in the same page as when we were talking about Black and White. It's really jarring at first, but once you get into that flow and kind of start to understand what Matsumoto's doing, the book reads really fast. Like, the first couple of chapters, I kind of had to pick up what was being put down, but by the end, I flew through the last 10 chapters thinking that there were 36 chapters. So when I got to 32 and that was the end, I about cried because I was really, really digging what was going on. So if you want, you might be able to just watch the movie and get the same enjoyment out of this. But because I've had this movie on my list for forever, it was recommended to me a long time ago. But when I saw the manga was on the app, I was like, hey, I'm already paying for this, I might as well read it. And I read like all 32 chapters in a sitting. It's really, really good. So if you're looking for a manga that's kind of weird, very, very immature, I'm going to put it out there really quick that the first panel opens with White walking through the town singing a song. He's like, booby, booby, poopy, poopy, booby, booby, poopy, poopy. That's the music I put to it. So, it's a very mature book. But again, these are about kids. It's a story about kids. It's weird. Anyways, so that's what I've been up to.
That sounds really interesting. And it does sound very like 90s manga. It's got a I can totally see that.
Sure. Yeah. Anyways, I guess let's jump back to you, Tia, or you, Kyle. But Kyle, where's that coming from? Sorry. Deep Cuts. Zach, you have this on your list. It's written by Kyle Higgins. Your name is not Kyle. I'm sorry. I just saw Kyle on the page. I'm rusty. Just someone take over for me.
Look, man, you're the boss. I'll be Kyle for the episode if you really need me to, okay?
Zach, tell us what else you read, please.
All right, so my other book that I read issues 1 through 3 of a book called Deep Cuts from Image Comics, written by Kyle Higgins and Joe Clark. Kyle Higgins, of course, now I just totally blanked on the name. Radiant Black. There we go. It came back to me. With guest artists. Each issue has a different artist. So the first one was Danilo Beyruth. The second one was Helena Macelis. And the third was Diego Greco. And the colors were by Igor Monti. Letters from Hassan Otsmane Elihu. This book was really interesting because I accidentally did 2 period piece books. Like, it just happened to be the way my stack lined up. But
Sure.
This one takes place, I'd say, like World War I era America heading into the Roaring 20s. It's all about jazz and like the jazz world of that time period. And each issue, it's like an anthology book where each issue is a different story. So you can grab one issue and it gives you a full, complete narrative front to back. So I thought that was really cool. And each artist has a different spin on it. The first and third issues kind of are par for the course. Like, the art is really nice. I enjoyed it. But the second issue from I just lost her name. Yeah, Helena Macelis was the one that really jumped out at me because she puts the book together in an Art Deco style, like a style of the time that you would find in like magazine advertisements from that era. And I thought that was a really interesting way to go about it, like to pull something from that era and make that the way to tell the story. I thought that was really cool. And each issue has a really unique take on something of the time. Like, the first issue tells the story of a young boy whose father was a clarinet player in a big band, and he passes away, and so the kid learns clarinet and wants to break into the music scene, and he learns real quick, that you can't trust everybody who says they want to help you, kind of thing,
Sure.
And so he gets to see both sides, the light and the dark of the music scene of the jazz scene of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was a really good story. The second one is about a woman who she is a music writer. And she gets a job to put all the music together for a show, and the show is about jazz. And the guy who owns the theater is like, your music is fine, but there's no jazz. Like, you didn't do any jazz. And so she kind of goes on this quest to understand and learn about jazz. And
do jazz, kid.
Yeah,
you gotta do jazz.
You gotta do jazz. But
what is jazz? I don't know, but you gotta do it.
Exactly. And she totally has that naive mindset of like, because she knows music so well that she's just like, if I hang out with some jazz people for a night, I'll learn how to do jazz and I'll write the best jazz song ever. And of course, she learns that that's just not how jazz works. The third one was really good. Yeah. You could learn jazz in a night. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. The third one is about like a family where you find out that the father used to be a musician, but then he decided to settle down and put roots in, but it's still kind of in the back of his mind, getting back out on the road. And like, he kind of has that back and forth of family or like the road kind of thing. And each issue is really interesting with a fun story. I think that they treat the music and like the era really well. Joe Clark is a musician himself and used to teach music. And what's cool is in the back matter of each issue, he spotlights a musician and there is sheet music for a song that they wrote in the back that you can play. Yeah,
Yo.
it's really neat. And I can't do that. I can't play it, but I think it's neat that it's there. And
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
if somebody else out there in podcast land can actually record themselves playing it, I would love to hear it. But
Oh, send that in. We'll play it on the next episode or
that'd be
two.
too
Whenever
cool.
you can do it, that'd be cool.
That would be too cool. But yeah, deep
Yeah.
cuts 1 through 3. I thought it was a lot of fun, and
Mhm.
I like that it's an anthology series. And I was really worried. Like, it was weird because like I'm reading the first issue, and I'm just waiting for the shoe to drop to be like, there's gonna be something weird sci-fi. They're gonna go demons at a crossroads. There's gonna be like witchcraft. I'm like, I don't want that. Like, I found myself being like, no, I just want a cool jazz story. And then it
Mhm.
was that, and I was super happy about it.
Awesome. That's awesome. Well, let me talk about one more book really quick, and then we're gonna jump over to Tia's hot take corner. That's what I'm calling it.
Oh boy.
I read the Enfield Gang Massacre #1. This is by Chris Condon and Jacob Phillips with color assist by Pip Martin. I forgot and didn't notice that this book came out. For some reason, it didn't say That Texas Blood, therefore I didn't see it. But this is the same creative team that's done That Texas Blood. If you like it, you're going to love this. Basically, you can play the aw shit, here we go again effect, because yes, it's Chris Condon and it's Jacob Phillips doing another Western comic set in fictional Texas, also known as their fictional county called Ambrose County. Was it a banger? Absolutely. Gorgeously illustrated, perfectly written, kind of creepy, and altogether like a feast for your eyes and your mind. Like, the back matter in this is a huge fake article written by someone of the time when this book takes place back in the Western frontier times of the late 1800s. And really, this duo just can't miss. And I don't know, if you like Westerns, if you like classic Westerns, if you liked all the Westerns that have been coming out from Image and Boom recently, you're going to love this. And I think this team has probably proven themselves. If you've read That Texas Blood, they're going to do some good stuff. And if you didn't grab this book, I understand. Like I said, I totally missed this. Even looking through the new books that were coming out on Sunday like I normally do, I just didn't even notice that this was done by them. So, but I would recommend this. It's going to be like a 5 or 6 issue miniseries, so you can probably wait to read this in trade. But honestly, the print version of this is done in that old like really nice paper stock that is not glossy. It feels like that's how this book should have been printed. I read it digitally, but I also got a physical copy, and now I've decided I'm only going to read the physical copy because it's so different. Phillips and Pip Martin's colors are so different on this weird non-glossy paper compared to the digital edition. It's almost like 2 different books, or it was colored in 2 different ways. So I don't know. I almost want to do like a compare and contrast like essay on this, given how different they look digitally versus physically. So more to come on that. We'll see. But
that's wild. I read that book as well, and I second your notion. I'm not usually much of a Westerns guy, but this one, that first issue pulled me in. They put this nice mystery out there, wondering like what really happened in a certain situation, and I loved that back matter as well. I think I always love when stuff like that is done to really like bring the world to life. Yeah,
sure. I usually fall into Danny's camp, our good pal Danny, who's on the show, who just if it's prose, I'm not reading it. But for some reason, I got sucked into this back matter, and I absolutely loved it. So looking forward to the second issue. I hope this whole thing keeps up. I love the entire aesthetic of this book. It's just amazing. But Tia, let's hop over to you before we jump into the second half of the show. What's the last book you read that you want to talk about?
Yes. So the last book I read, Purr Evil #1. This is an Image book by Mirka Andolfo, Laura Braga, Giovanni Manga, and Brian Valenza. And high level, like, seemed really interesting. Cats and murder and like maybe some mother daughter generational trauma. What's not to love?
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of the story, I'll say there are some like interesting mysteries that this issue sets up. There's this guy, Steve, and he has a teenage son, and I guess like they own a building, and the wife just died. So it's just the 2 of them. And then there's a mother daughter who like are sort of secretive and nomadic, and they live in the building, and they're about to move out apparently. And the teenagers have like a secret friendship because the teenage girl is like not allowed to go anywhere ever without her mother. So they have to keep their friendship a secret. And then like there's also a band in this world with like a missing singer that this guy Steve is like kind of obsessed with, and he's trying to connect all these dots in his head. Like somehow he is convinced that it has something to do with this woman who lives in his building. And then if this all seems really obvious and like spoilery, like I promise it's not. There's like a lot more to it, and there's like also kind of some weird supernatural element, and I haven't even touched on the murder yet. So there's still
Where are the cats?
They're in there. They're in there with the supernatural murder stuff, Mike. Okay. Like
I thought maybe I was like, are the people cats? Is that what it is?
Were they all cats the entire time?
The thing is, I would say like that's all just kind of hinted in this issue. So the cats are like not a big part of the story yet.
Okay.
So far.
Okay.
And then there's a lot more to it. Without getting spoilery, I'll just say I wish the art were more my aesthetic. And I'm not I'm not going to say it's objectively bad, like, you know, but it's really heavy on the character acting, and it doesn't have like that kind of romantic painterly aesthetic that I prefer, like what I talked about the watercolors earlier, right? It's pretty prosaic art. The world building is kind of secondary to the characters and how they play off of each other. Like in particular, I found that the mother is way overacted in every single scene that she's in, like super exaggerated facial expressions. And I kind of actually blame the script here a little bit because her dialogue is also like really kind of ridiculously over the top. However, like I will also say all of this can also be an aesthetic choice. Like it's giving telenovela, it's giving soap opera. Like that is, and that's not a bad aesthetic. Like it is an artistic choice that you can use to tell a certain story. It's just not my favorite one to like inhabit for a while. So I don't know if I'll keep reading this one.
Interesting. I'm looking through some of the preview pages for this, and I totally feel what you're saying. The art, it's really weird because I like the look of Laura Braga's art, but I could definitely see like there's a lot of over animation of some of the characters, which is very, very interesting. I don't know.
Some people dig it, like, and so that's why I call it out as a feature. If that's your thing, then you might really like this book. It's not my thing. I like the more like moody, subtle, kind of painterly Carl Stevens style.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, just looking at Laura Braga's art online, like she does that with a lot of her characters. But I mean, she did Catwoman, and Catwoman looks good. But then there's a lot of there's a lot of just booby photos on the internet. I don't know how else to describe it. Pictures that she's drawn. So I don't know.
Booby,
whatever.
Booby.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, with that, we're gonna take a quick break. When we come back, we're gonna talk about the comics on the top of our pile and maybe something else. We'll see. We'll be back in just a second. Before we get into the second half of the show, two quick little housekeeping things I want to do. As always, you can follow us on the internet, Instagram, TikTok, Discord. We got a Discord link in our show notes. We got a Goodreads account. We've got our YouTube channel where you can get all the updates for IRCB. We are technically on Twitter, now known as X, but we don't use it anymore because Elon Musk sucks. So anyways, follow us on the internet. As always, you can always support us on Patreon at patreon.com/IRCB podcast. Your money directly supports this show. Make sure that we get the episodes out. Make sure that we get things made on Patreon exclusively, like the Better Batmobile series, like Saga of Saga, like what else we do? IRCB Movie Club, so much other stuff, all on Patreon, patreon.com/IRCB podcast. So let's get into things. Let's talk about the top of our pile. To get things started, we're going to change up the order a little bit. We're going to start with all the folks hanging out with us live on Discord. This week, Danny is reading Disney Villains Hades #1. Paul G is reading Stand Still, Stay Silent Book 4. And Hugh is reading Void Rivals #3. I guess to get us started, I'm gonna go first. That's what I have in the notes. So I'm gonna talk about the Cull #1. The order's all messed up this week. I'm sorry. We're changing things. I'm back. My brain's frazzled. But I'm reading the Cull #1. This is by Kelly Thompson, Mattia DeLulis, and letters by Hassan Osmani Elhau. And I know there's a bunch of X-Men books coming out this week that I'm going to read regardless because I have to. Uncanny Avengers and Dark X-Men. Even with Ed Brisson writing on Alpha Flight, I have no interest because Marvel just needs to stop publishing Alpha Flight. I don't understand why it's still a thing. Even in Immortal Hulk, those were the worst issues because no one cares about Alpha Flight.
Nope.
I'm just going to throw that out there. But this book, The Cull #1, has me excited this week. It's Something is Killing the Children vibes mixed with the Goonies-style adventure as 5 friends set off to shoot a short film on a forbidden rock near their home the summer before they all go their separate ways. Who else has a forbidden rock in their hometown that they want to shoot a film on? One of them, though, has lied, and it's a lie that will change their lives forever. Honestly, I'm here for the creative team. Kelly Thompson has been knocking it out of the park with all of her independent books. Matea DeLulis' art, Google that person's name. Incredible. Just Google this book. It's one of the most beautiful books that's coming out. I'm very excited. So this is a 1, 2, 3 punch with Hassan on letters, and it's going to be a miniseries. I mean, like, all these things point to I love this, so I'm game. Anyways.
This sounds very up my alley.
Yeah, you should check it out. Honestly, Kelly Thompson, if you're not reading Black Cloak, if you didn't read Black Cloak, this is the next book that I'm like, I think this is going to be a banger hit for her. Really, really excited. But Tia, what are you excited for this upcoming week?
So, throwing back to the beginning of the episode where I was talking about my moving situation, another thing that I did was organize all of my artwork from cons into a single portfolio book. I know. And I rediscovered some things I had kind of forgotten about, like this really cute sketch of a couple of Xenomorphs that I got at Thought Bubble for my birthday from Casper Wingard, because he was like just sitting there drawing them, and I was like, oh, those are so cute. And he's like, oh, you want them? He was just like, yeah.
Tia.
Not usually the adjective you hear about Xenomorphs.
Yeah.
So I have Cornish Rex cats, and they remind me of Cornish Rex cats because Cornish Rex cats also have like a whippy tail, and they also make that like horrible screeching noise. So they're very similar. And they also try to burrow into your chest for warmth. So
I did a quick Google search for cute xenomorph and came up with a lot of really interesting prints and stuff. And like, you know what, Tia? I'll give you. They could be cute.
I love them. I just love them. And I love Alien, and like I know we're summoning Nick now, but I just was like, man, I haven't read some Alien comics in a while. And I knew that Marvel was doing one, but I don't like reading single issues anymore. So I was like, well, okay, if they have an arc finished, I'll read it. And lo and behold, next week, Alien #5 by Declan Shalvey and Andrea Ricardo is coming out. So that counts as an arc. I will read 1 through 5.
Hell yeah.
I have no idea, honestly, what the story is even about. Like, it looks like there's some chick on the moon and then aliens. Like, there's really only one alien story, right? And that's what I want. Right. Like, that's what everyone wants. So looking forward to that. And also, I'll just throw out my horror genre hot take, which is that horror is a summer genre, not a fall genre.
I'm curious your reasoning.
Well, okay. So, like, in the summer, you're miserable, just baseline, right? Like, you're sweaty and like overstimulated, like you're sensorily overstimulated, right?
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
So you're on edge already. Like, it takes, half a thing to make you snap. And you have to have like all your windows open all the time, so you're very vulnerable, but then it's like you feel really claustrophobic because there's just like the oppressive like heat just bearing down on you. So I just feel like atmospherically that feels more horrific to me than like autumn, which is delightful in every way. And also, if you think about all the really great horror movies, like they're all sweaty.
Yeah,
that's true.
I was
Summer
literally
camps.
just thinking everybody sweats in horror movies,
like,
unless they're a winter-based horror movie.
Imagine Texas Chainsaw Massacre in like a cozy cardigan. It just isn't happening.
Vermont Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah.
To be fair, I've been to Vermont, and
so you guys are giving Stephen King free ideas right now. Yeah. How dare you?
But even Stephen King's got a lot of summertime horror, like
True.
There's just something about summertime to me that is more about horror than autumn.
Right.
That's a good point. Yeah.
It's interesting because I'm like, horror is a very broad genre, right? Mm-hmm. I feel like slasher movies definitely lean towards horror movies, like with the exception of maybe Freddy Krueger, right? Who is like an inherently a Halloween-based villain in a lot of ways, and Michael Myers, who is inherently a Halloween-based villain.
He kind of has to be.
But he has to be, I think. But really, I think like slashers in general, like your generic slashers totally work during this summer. So I'm on board with this. I think when you think about the alien movies in general, it's kind of like summer in space.
Yeah, it's
So
like sweaty and claustrophobic.
yeah.
Yeah. To back you up, I have a group of friends who are all like diehard horror nuts, and they start horror season like in August, like the beginning of August, like late
Exactly.
July, and then they
Yeah.
just watch nothing but horror through Halloween. So yeah,
Hell yeah.
all summer long they're going nuts with the horror movies.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
I'll say to you, this Alien series, though, to tie it back to the book that you picked, Declan Shalvey's run on this is kicking butt. I think you're really going to dig it. Even though there is really only one Alien story, like you said, but I think he's done a great job, like building up the horror and stuff. He's kind of, I don't know, I'm digging it.
We
Even
all
after
love
Philip
that
Kennedy
one Alien
Johnson's run.
story.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Zach, what about you? What are you reading?
I'm reading this little indie book. I'm excited to do it. It's from this very new name in comics. Maybe you've heard of them, Grant Morrison. I've heard that they've done a couple small runs, some small print things. I'm reading All-Star Superman. I've never read it before, and I'm very excited to. I've never been much of a Superman guy. But spoilers, this is a shameless plug, but next month is September on my show, and the whole month is Super Family books. And I wanted the crescendo, the WrestleMania, to be All-Star Superman, because everything that I've heard is really positive about this book. And there is a contingent of people, I'm not saying I'm one of them because I don't know yet, but I've heard people say that it might be the best Superman story ever written. I've heard people make that argument. So I just felt like this is the one. It was between that and Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow from Alan Moore. So, but I went with All-Star Superman because I've never read it. And
I'm going to make a request for
check
your show that you recommend a soup pairing to eat for each of the Superman characters that you discuss.
Brian in the chat did say he thought you said September and thought you might have a month of soup content coming. So, like, I think a lot of people might be thinking about this.
It's only comics about soup. Yeah.
Yes.
There's
yes.
But like,
I mean,
what
September
is
starts
Superman's
to cool
favorite
down.
soup?
Yeah.
It's got to be corn chowder, right? Because he's a Midwest boy.
Ooh, okay. Corn chowder.
You know, I'm a Midwest boy, and I've never had corn chowder. Actually, that kind of brings up an entirely different conversation that maybe we can have now, because we're at the end of the show, and I don't care on this type of episode. There is this idea. I sent a video to like a group of friends. Brian is in this group of people on Telegram, and it was this guy saying that Pittsburgh is a Midwest town, and that states like that are in the middle of the country, your Kansas, your Arkansas, your most of Missouri, your Dakotas, those are not Midwest states. Those are just middle of America states, I think, which is different than the Midwest.
It's interesting, yeah, because I mean, St. Louis is the gateway to the West, right? Like, but this is based on the way that America existed in the 19th century, and I feel like that's where this logic is coming from.
Yeah, well, the way that this person in this TikTok, I'll find it and send it to the IRCP group. But like, and maybe if you're on Discord, you can see it as well. But the way they kind of positioned it was that like there's just the niceties of the Midwest, and Pittsburgh has that quality, but the rest of the state of Pennsylvania doesn't, and has a lot of like East Coast vibes, or in some parts Southern vibes. And he like circled some places on Pennsylvania. Zach, I know you live there, so like maybe you know what I'm talking about.
100%. Yeah. Like the state, it's such a huge state, and it really is broken up into three, because like where I'm at is like Southern Pennsylvania, and depending where you are, it feels like Maryland, Baltimore, or it feels like the South. And but then you get out towards Philly, and then you've got that very East Coast kind of fast paced, and I totally agree. Like you could totally just break off like that entire section of Pennsylvania and make it part of Ohio, and it would fit. You know, like it's interesting how you go across this one state and there are such different vibes.
Yeah.
Arkansas has that too, to be honest. Oh, yeah? Arkansas like has it like wants to be Southern, but it's too Midwestern to be like weird Southern.
Right. It's the literal definition of a flyover state, in the sense that like it doesn't know where it wants to be and no one wants to be there.
I will say the Ozarks are really beautiful. However,
Sure.
there are long stretches where like you could stop 10 times to buy meth, but nowhere to buy food.
Oh, well.
Can't wait to clip this and throw it on TikTok with no context. No, it's interesting because like how do you define where like the Midwest is in a lot of ways, and like I don't know, in my mind it's like Wisconsin, Minnesota, Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, pieces of Pennsylvania. I don't even think you hit Kentucky and Tennessee. Those don't even count, right? Because like those immediately start to become Southern. But you start to go like into West Virginia, and I drove through Pennsylvania, totally random thing. Kelly and I are driving back from Indiana. We had to drive through like this little pip of West Virginia to go from Pennsylvania to West Virginia to Pennsylvania. And I was like,
weird.
Why is America like this? Who
One
chose
time
this?
I very earnestly asked someone from Ohio if it was considered the East Coast.
Oh boy.
Having, being a California girl who considered anything east of Pasadena to be Kentucky, I was like, I don't know. You guys are in the East Coast time zone. Are you? Tell me, what is that all about?
I'm sure their brain sat on that thought for a really long time to be like, could we? Maybe? Are we? Is there something good about Ohio now?
No, they were pretty offended by that.
Badge?
Yeah. I think that, so we don't really talk about Rust Belt as its own place, but I think we should, because
Right.
And like Appalachia, which I just learned, like the reason that the Appalachian fairies and like cryptids and stuff are so weird is because they literally come from like Scotland. And
really?
like thousands of years ago, like the Appalachian Mountains are the same mountains that you get in like the British Isles, and that's why they have the same fae.
Oh, I like that.
If you're ever in the Appalachians and somebody calls your name in the woods, do not answer.
Right. Yeah. I watched I think I read something like that on Twitter one night, and like happened to get up and like get some water and looked out to the backyard of the place that I used to stay at, and it was just pitch black, and like I had a chill go down my spine that like if I hear my name right now, I don't know what to do. Like it was freaking me out for like a whole night. Why do cryptids exist, and why do they scare me so much?
I saw this really interesting video explaining a lot of that as well, where like the Appalachian Mountains are like so ancient, and like they have existed for so long. Like that range pushed up so long ago. Like I think like Pangean era, like they already existed. And so, and the person was making the point, because this was a person who believes fully in all cryptids and stuff, and they were like, if there's weird stuff somewhere, it's probably really here, because this is so old and so so of a time. I thought that was really interesting. Shout out to Old Gods of Appalachia. If you've never listened to that podcast, it's phenomenal.
Yeah,
It talks all about that stuff, but in its story form. Love it.
Yeah. There's also a tabletop game, I think, that just recently came out.
Yeah.
So if you're into that, all that kind of horror cryptid stuff, I love reading about it. It scares the pants off of me. So it's, it's one of those things. Anyways, I think we should probably wrap up the show here with that. If you have thoughts about where your state lives in terms of are you Midwest or not, send us an email at ircbpodcast@gmail.com. Next week's show, I'm going to let Danny handle it, because Danny's hosting the show next week with Paloma and Kate to talk manga app comparisons. They're going to be talking about Shonen Jump, the Viz app, Kodansha's app that they have, Manga Plus, and more. Unfortunately, this was supposed to be a Twitch episode. Due to scheduling fuckery on my part, that's not going to be happening. So I'm sorry if you were looking forward to that, but you can always listen to our show on Discord. There's a link to that in the show notes. Infinity Shred is the best band in the universe. They do all of our music. Xander will offer you a blanket if you get too cold at night. I want to say thank you to Zach and Tia. It was what I had before was way creepier, and I changed it, guys. So everyone should be happy. I want to say thank you to Zach and Tia for this episode. Thank you to Brian for proof listening. Thank you to everyone for listening live on Discord. We love you to death. Thank you for listening in general. You're fantastic human beings. And until next time, comics are good, and so are you.